Hi guys, in today's video I'll be ranking my top 10 favorite standalone books of all time. It's pretty excessive in a sense because I had a hard time actually deciding which ones made the cut. But I'm very happy to bring you guys this list so maybe you can better understand exactly what clicks for me and what I like to read about. If you haven't read any of these 10 books, I do really recommend them. They're absolutely astounding, obviously, because they made the cut. So on the 10th place, we have If We Were Villains by Emil Rio and Secret History by Donna Tartt. And I know I'm already breaking the rules, but this is my ranking and these are the only two books that I'll be putting in the same place because I love them both equally. Both of these books are contemporary mysteries and more precisely, they are dark academia. I love dark academia and I love these books a lot. Both of them deal with a group of students that are at an university and they have this insatiable need of knowledge. And If We Were Villains, our group of students gets really enthralled by Shakespeare and they act only Shakespearean plays. I really love the juxtaposition between the Shakespearean plays that we get to see in the book and the real life events that our characters go through. That comparison and how those characters bleed through them and overtake their mentality and reasoning is incredibly fascinating. And I just love both of these books because they deal with artists that let themselves go through the thing that they become very passionate about, whether that's acting or philosophy, as is the case in Secret History. Another thing that really stands out for me in these books that I really loved was our small cast of characters, how they interact with each other, how their relationships evolve and progress, and also, obviously, the atmosphere of the dark academia. It's great. It's a great atmosphere. It's very romanticized nowadays because of the Secret History, but I do really like it. I'm not yet bored by it or think it's overdone, especially since I haven't read that many Dark Academia books, but I do recommend both of these. On the 9th place, we have The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, and this is a fantasy book. When I picked this book up, I was really craving for a circus-themed book, but I wasn't expecting it to deliver. But boy, oh boy, was I wrong. This book is
something else.
Like, I don't usually find that great of a world building in the way that it's done in The Night Circus in a lot of books. When I say that, I refer to the fact that the author is really able to transport you into this circus, and she makes you feel as if you've walked that path and you've tasted the cotton candy and you've seen fireworks and you've seen acrobats, and everything feels as if you're there to revel in that circus. It also is helped by the fact that I binged it. The only book that I've ever read in one sitting is The Night Circus. It really felt like an experience of arriving at the circus, seeing everything, and then moving out. And the synopsis for this story is two magicians basically enter a competition, and obviously one of them wins, one of them doesn't. I don't think both of them enter it willingly, but I don't think the plot is necessarily the most important thing about this book. Like, if you're expecting a grand fantasy book with a very complex magic system, you're not going to get that. It's a very soft magic system, but the thing that makes this book stand out for me especially is how it feels like you're actually transported there, and it's an experience on its own. And if you're looking for a circus themed book, this is the one to go with. I cannot recommend it more. It really hits. And if you guys have any other circus themed books to recommend to me, because I'm a bit scared to pick any other one after this one, but if you have, please let me know, because I love circus themed books. They're just Great. Now let's move on to the next book. On the 8th place, we have Stories of Your Life and Others by Ted Chiang. This is a short story collection and it's science fiction. I've said it a million times and I'll say it again on this channel. I'm not the type of person that loves short stories. I do appreciate them, but it's just not my jam. Well, Ted Chiang appeared and I just love this book so much. It's one of the smartest collection of short stories and it's one of the smartest books that I've ever read in my entire life. The ability that the author has to create so many mind-bending and unique concepts is just astounding. Like, you have, I don't know how many short stories, I think it's like 5 or 6. Each one of them is incredibly unique and stands out from the other. The exploration of humanity and psychology, and also something that I don't usually find in my science fiction are elements of mythology that are woven through. We have the Tower of Babylon, or we have the Golem. I just recommend it to everyone. It's really an eye-opener. It really makes you understand and empathize a lot more with people and what they're going through, and the concepts that he comes up with are so incredibly creative and different from one another. Like, it's not just a regurgitated idea over and over again. Also, if you're like looking for the vibe and atmosphere that he creates in these books, the movie Arrival by Denis Villeneuve is based on the short story Story of Your Life. So Ted Chiang is amazing. I do recommend him. It's very easy to get through, so it's not a very difficult book. So when you have the time, please like pick it up. It's a 5 out of 5 star, obviously, since it's on this list. At number 7, we have Fever Dream by George R. R. Martin. And this book is a historical fiction horror book. At first, after my first read, and the only read because I still haven't reread the book, I wasn't as impressed with it as I've become. This is the type of book, especially for me, that over time it's really become one of my favorites. Obviously, I just cannot get it out of my head. The reason as to why is the atmosphere that George R. R. Martin created in this book. It takes place in New Orleans, and the whole plot happens around a steamboat and on a steamboat on a river, so you get the gist of the atmosphere already. He really knows on what details to concentrate in order to create this incredibly immersive and tangible world. Even though the book, I love the main character, like he is amazing, and another side character, I really like him as well, but this isn't the most character-driven book that I've read at all, so this is why I was a bit skeptical about the book after I've read it. But the way the atmosphere sticks with you after you read it, and how great the plot is, because I haven't said that, the plot is great. Like, it's a page turner, you're constantly engrossed in the story and you want to find out more, you want to see what happens, even if it's about steamboats. I hope you guys like steamboats, I like them.
I like turtles.
So that helps. But it's just the type of story that is incredibly atmospheric, and you will remember a lot of scenes from this book your whole life. I'm not going to spoil anything, and if you consider picking this book up, try to stay as far away from spoilers, because it's there are book covers, or there are things that if you search in Google, you're gonna get spoiled, so beware of that, because there's a big twist in the story. So yeah, if you're the type of reader that loves very atmospheric and very tangible worlds, this is the book for you. Next up, at number 6, we have The Ocean at the End of the Lane by one of my favorite authors, Neil Gaiman. This is a magical realism book, and this is my first book of his that I've ever read, and this story revolves around a 9-year-old boy who's not named, and he doesn't necessarily feel very loved by his friends or by his family, but one day his luck turns because he meets a little girl called Letty Hemstock, and fun fact, she's a witch. I know. But yeah, they go on adventures and it's super interesting. But the thing that I really, really loved about this book is Neil Gaiman's ability to really bank in on the fears that we have when we are kids, and he really evolves them, and you see them develop and see them take other shapes and see how they become into the fears that we have as adults. I love the contrast between the perspective that the adults have from the perspective that the kids have on the things that are happening around them. That primordial fear that we have, that bone-chilling fear of the dark that we have as children, I love seeing it from the perspective of the adults that Neil Gaiman writes. In this book, Neil Gaiman really blends horror and these childhood fears and magical realism incredibly well. So this is obviously a recommend. And the fifth place, we have 11/22/63 by Stephen King. This is my favorite Stephen King that I've read thus far, just like with The Ocean at the End of the Lane. And this is a historical fiction, science fiction, fantasy book. It's a immersion of everything, basically. What truly made me really like this book was the fact that it was so fast-paced. And I know I've heard a lot of other people that have read the book say that the pacing was slow, but for me, it was incredibly fast-paced. Constantly things were happening and I was on the edge of my seat. Basically, the story revolves around a guy that time travels to the 60s in order to stop the assassination of JFK. Crazy, I know. But I just loved it, and I love the way the book was composed in the sense that you had this big thing looming over our characters and our narrative, the fact that he had to stop the assassination, but there were so many secondary things that were happening and derailing his plans. It just those things constantly build up the suspense and delivered a great climax to the story. I know a lot of people don't like the way King ends some of his books, but this ending is my favorite that I've read. I mean, it's pretty up there with Dead Zone, but it's a great ending to a huge tome of a book, so you will be rewarded. But I just love the way time travel is implemented in the story and how you get to live in the 60s. Like, the atmosphere is incredibly great. Obviously, since it's a King book, the characters are incredibly fleshed out and they feel very real, like human beings with desires and regrets and wants. And I don't know, it was really fun to read such a quirky book of his. It was great to read such a unique book of his, and I just loved the pacing and the idea behind it all. On the fourth place, we have a classic, I know, our first classic of the season, of the ranking, and it is Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. I've wanted to read this book my whole life, and I finally got around to it, and I'm really, really happy that I did. It's one of the best exploration of the psychology of a killer that I've ever read, if not the best that I've ever read in my whole entire life. So if you don't know, Crime and Punishment follows this guy, Raskolnikov, who is incredibly poor. He feels like he has no other option than to rob and do something really bad to a pawn lady. I love that from the get-go we see him come to terms with the idea and see how he rationalizes it, and then we get a whole lot of book of him going through a lot of different mental states. And if you like character-driven books, this is the book for you. It's the topic is very hard and you have to mentally prepare yourself for it. Everything is incredibly bleak. It's incredibly hopeless. It feels like there's nothing good left in the world, but it's one of the best books that I've read, obviously, and I do recommend it, but beware that the topic is pretty and the book is pretty bleak. On the third place, we have yet another classic, and it is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. This book is the ultimate revenge story. We have revenge on the long term, on the short term. I love that at the beginning of the book we know everything about our main character. We know every single thought, we know every little detail. but as we progress, we start to question what he does. It's really interesting to see a character evolve so much and to really not be sure if he still is the good guy that you were rooting for, or if he has become just morally gray or just the actual villain. It's a very satisfying story. It has one of the best character interactions and character arcs that I've read, and I do recommend it. It's a classic for a reason. Everybody should read it, even if it's a bit harder at first, like the pacing is a bit slow. It does pay off, and yeah, go pick it up. So on the second place, we have Between Two Fires by Christopher Buehlman, and this is a historical fiction novel. The thing that I always think about when I think about this book is the incredible prose and the incredible atmosphere and characters that are in this book. This is a very episodic book, and we follow two characters that really need to get to Avignon during the Black Plague. The people that they encounter along the way, and the treacherous paths and all of the adventures that they go through are incredibly enthralling, and it's really interesting to see them evolve their relationship and start to like each other, or how they bicker. As you get more and more into the book, it becomes more streamlined and it has a more linear timeline, so you get to actually like dig your claws into those characters and learn more about them. This is one book that really shows how much attention to detail the author has paid and how well he knows to write evocative and very subtle moments into his story. And all these moments really do pay off by the end. Character arcs are incredibly well developed and you really get attached to them, and I do recommend it. It's incredibly fast paced and you can get through it really quickly because it's short. And yeah, it's just one of the best books that I've read, so I do really recommend it. So for the winner so on the first place in this ranking, we have my favorite standalone book of all time, which is Gates of Fire by Steven Pressfield. And this book is a historical fiction, and we follow the battle at Thermopylae between Spartans and Persians. What sticks with me after I've read the book are the characters. These are some of my favorite characters that I've ever read about. We follow mainly from the perspective of the Spartans. We do find out about the Persians, and I really liked how they're written as well. They're not like in the movie 300 where they're just villains. They actually have a lot of depth to them, but the Spartans are so well written, they're so fleshed out, and I loved seeing these people that have become very stereotypical and everybody thinks they're like big bad fighters actually have human reactions. We get to see how they're born and bred. We get to see how they internalize very traumatic things that happen to them. We see how they face up to matters of life and death. That mentality, that Spartan Lacedaemonian mentality, is so well written in the book, and it plays such an important part to the overall story that it just sticks with you. Like the braveness they had, the stoicism, it's just incredibly astounding. The whole battle scene, because we get scenes with them in the city and then we get to see them fighting as well, it's just incredibly well done. Like the Spartans aren't just tough warriors, they're humans that have internalized everything that has happened to them and they've become very rough around the edges. But I do like that Steven Pressfield really digs deep and shows you the raw human people that were the Spartans. Pressfield really knows how to write these great characters, and you get to really feel for them. It's a great story. You learn about the battle, which is a plus. This book really sticks with me for the philosophy behind everything that a life of a Spartan requires or means. And I do really recommend it. If you haven't read it, please check it out. It's a very great read. And I'm really curious now that I've showed you guys what my top 10 favorite books are. I'm curious to see if you guys have read any of them. If you have, let me know if you like them, if you didn't like them. And I'm really curious to talk to you guys about everything and what are your guys' favorite books, because I do want to expand my horizons more. So if you have read any of these books, let me know in the comments below what you thought about them, or if you have any other favorites, obviously, because there are a lot more books, Bianca. And if you have any other favorites, let me know in the comments below, because I'm very curious to find out, and I cannot wait to catch you guys next time. Bye!